Hi guys, this is gsndon.com and I'm here with a handset called the Huawei G8. We've tested quite a few Huawei phones lately. We had the Honor 7, Honor 5X and P9, and here we are with the Huawei G8. It's an interesting mid-ranger. It was launched at IFA 2015 with the Mate S, and it's sort of a response that Huawei gives the Samsung Galaxy A series. It's also known as the Huawei GX8 and it's priced at around $349 on Amazon. It fits between the Huawei Honor models and Huawei Mate models, and it's obviously a phablet with a 5.5-inch diagonal, and it's actually one of the widest Huawei phones I've tested, and it measures 76.5 millimeters in width, so pretty wide. It's wider than the Galaxy Note 5, for example, but still not as wide as the Huawei Mate 8, and it's 80.6 millimeters. Comes in gold, gray or silver, and it's massive but still pretty. It measures 7.5 millimeters in thickness and weighs 167 grams, which makes it a bit thicker than the Huawei Mate S and around, let's say, 11 grams heavier or something like that. Still feels pretty comfy to hold, doesn't feel very heavy, and the 2.5D glass up front looks very sexy. It has pretty narrow bezels, it's comfy and provides good grip. Even one-hand usage is easy here, but only if you have large hands, as I happen to do. And other than that, I have to say that the buttons are on the comfy side, so buttons are here, comfy to press, good feedback, and the design involves an unibody metal case. The back is gently curved, and we have rounded corners, maybe even more rounded than the Huawei Honor models. And at the top and at the bottom we have special antenna lids to ensure better connectivity. So overall, solid build and elegant, nothing to object. And now it's time to talk about the display. So the screen, 5.5-incher IPS LCD Full HD, and the official site talked about TFT, but all the other sources talked about IPS LCD. Now the video player is this one here. It has all the usual options that the Huawei phones have. And those include, we got DTS sound, we got playback speed, and we got, once again, playback speed. And this pop-up play style feature that lets you minimize the video and keep doing some other activities, and then get back to the playback if you want to. Now the actual the actual viewing experience involves some not very aesthetically pleasing black edges around the image. Those here are not exactly pleasing to the eye, and the colors are quite vivid, at the same time realistic. I would call the brightness okay, not more than that, and we have wide viewing angles, as you can well see. The contrast is only so-so, and because of the 2.5D glass, there's a bit of reflectivity going on here. Other aspects related to the screen, let's see them in the gallery. Let's see what type of pixels we're dealing with. Okay, so here we go. We put the screen under the microscope and this came out. We have RGB stripes pixels, and then we did the brightness test and we were underwhelmed by the 351 lux units achieved. This is an unimpressive result and we scored below the Huawei P8 Lite, Sony Xperia Z1, but at least we beat the LG G3 and Huawei Honor 7. Of course, the screen gets its very own settings, and those are here. We got color temperature with a slider that goes from warm to cold or vice versa. We got wallpaper, font size, there is daydream, indicator light, and that's pretty much it. Overall the screen is okay, but it could be brighter, actually much brighter. Now on the hardware side of things, we're dealing with a handset that has an octa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 615 processor, and you can see it here. It's accompanied by 3GB of RAM and 32GB of storage plus a micro SD card slot, and then it has a pretty fluid UI. Didn't notice any lag or any problem when loading up the apps. Usually if there's no trace of lag, sometimes the apps takes a while to open. On other devices it feels snappier than the Huawei Honor 5X, for example. We had no trouble running games like Super Phantom Cat or Riptide GP2. So let's fire it up. And speaking of games, when playing this title for 15 minutes, we achieved a temperature of 34 degrees Celsius, so which means there's no overheating here, and that's good news, especially for a metal phone. Skipping this, and let's see how the graphics are handled during a full level. I'm going to highlight the graphics because the 3D benchmarks that take advantage of the GPU, weren't very impressive on this model. One good result we achieved in benchmarks was the one in quadrant, where we actually were on par with the Samsung Galaxy S5, which is not a shabby phone, quite powerful even nowadays. And here you go, nice water effects, nice lighting effects, textures and all that check out pretty well. I said before, we did benchmarks and quite a few of them as usual. You can have a gander here. We did Nanomark, GFX Bench, we did Geekbench 3, and usually I found that this model is above the Lenovo Fab Plus and it gets some poor results in the 3D benchmarks. I found it that in 3D Mark it's below the Samsung Galaxy A5 2016, which is one of its rivals. It's basically a typical mid-ranger with all those results. You'll get more on that in the full text review, so generally mid-range benchmarks. Also on the temperature side, we get back to that. After performing the GFX bench test, we achieved 30.4 degrees Celsius, so once again, no overheating and okay performance. Now it's time to talk about the acoustics. We seem to have two grills here. Only the right one hides the speaker, this one is only for the purpose of probably hiding a microphone. And the player is very familiar. If you've seen all of our, let's say, last 5 Huawei reviews, the player has stayed the same. Options here: filter, timer, home screen, clear cache. As usual, Huawei does not include an equalizer, sadly. Now let's listen to some music. So as I said before, no equalizer, only this DTS option at the top. And I have to say that the experience, well, it doesn't feel very loud. The volume is just okay, the sound is crisp, there's no distortion, and the bass is also okay, but it doesn't break any records or stand out of the crowd. We used the decibel meter to actually measure the performance of the speaker and got up to 80 decibels, which is not very impressive. It scores below the LG AKA and the Huawei Honor 6, but at least it beats the Samsung Galaxy A5 first generation. Now the headphones. I'm sure you've seen quite a few of those. We had the same on the Huawei Mate S, Huawei Mate 8, Huawei P9, P8, so you've seen them a lot. Made of plastic, typical, not very comfy in the ear, but good bass, loud volume and pretty clear sound. And once inserted, they allow us to activate the FM radio, which I usually take a while to find. Here we go. Nice interface, but it does not exactly find the stations as fast as I like them to. Okay, so overall, the speakers could be louder, but the headphones do a fine job, provided you're going to stand the fact that they're not very comfy. And now let's talk about the other features like the camera. Okay, so we're dealing here with a 13 megapixel back shooter with a dual LED flash and optical image stabilization, which is a nice feat to have, f2.0 aperture and autofocus. And at the front we have the 5 megapixel shooter for the selfies, quite small if you ask me. Now the camera app sadly does not start up very fast. As you can see, it took a while to get going. And let's see what else it can give us. We have a pretty fluid zoom. And the focusing, I have to say I'm pretty impressed by it because it's rather fast. Of course not Galaxy S7 fast, but still pretty fast. But sadly, picture taking is not as speedy as we'd like it to be. The camera options are typical for a Huawei phone, exactly what we've seen in the latest reviews. So we have these options: HDR, best photo, audio note, panorama, all focus and watermark, plus the settings related to resolution, perfect selfie, timer, optical image stabilization, there's ISO, white balance, and exposure, saturation, contrast and brightness. Now when it comes to the actual modes, we got time-lapse, video, photo, beauty, good food, and of course we can play with effects. If you want to talk about the video, nothing fancy here, pretty typical. You can film up to full HD, apparently with stereo acoustics. There's optical image stabilization and apparently even a beauty mode if you want to film with that activated. Okay, so that's all you get here options wise. Time to get to the gallery and see what shots we've taken. We have two series of shots in two different towns, one during a cloudy day, the other one well, less cloudy, more sunny. So things to notice here are the realistic colors, good brightness and nice exposure. And then after we took this shot, we found it to be a bit too dark in this area. We used the HDR, which makes the image a bit washed out and a bit too white. And then we took some shots of graffiti under a bridge and felt the need to use a flash, a regular shot with no flash and a shot with flash, which actually make the colors more realistic and the image appear to be better rendered. And we also took some selfies that are pretty crisp, nice skin texture, nice hair texture, but it doesn't compare to the excellent selfies of the Huawei Honor 5X. Very nice clouds. Many phones, even flagships, have problems with catching clouds. And then we put the zoom to the test. So we started zooming in on this crane. Here you can barely see it, but impressively we got to an impressive level of detail when zooming in at the max and saw that crane in action. More shots here. Every once in a while the exposure gets a bit wrong and there's slight oversaturation, but usually the colors are okay, details are good in close-ups and landscape. And we also played with the all focus feature right here. You can focus on this or on this, however you please. Quite nice. Okay, so details were great in landscape and portrait. Here we played in landscape and close-up, and here we play with the focus to very good results. And then we get to the second gallery. I told you before, we took another one in another town in earlier May, where we registered a bit more sun. Okay, so here we have an excellent texture of these woods, houses, and this is a very nice close-up that really shows you what I mean when I say texture. Good close-ups of flowers and generally good capture and quality. You will not see many blurred shots here or many missed shots. And the panorama was also pretty impressive. 16,768 over 2688, good resolution to have for a panorama. The conclusion here is that we get about the same quality as the Huawei Honor 5X. Wouldn't be surprised if it's the same camera, but it also feels slightly above that, possibly thanks to the great focusing on board and of course optical image stabilization. And now let's talk about the nighttime capture. So when it comes to the nighttime pics, I have to say we were pleasantly surprised. We're dealing here with some very good shots. Some of them remind me of the pleasant surprise that was the LG Nexus 5X. So I was just as pleasantly surprised by this phone as I was by that one. We have bright images, clear pictures even in the middle of the night, and the light halos are pretty reasonable, while even some flagships out there will tend to enlarge the halos and make them a bit blurry. This is not the case. We have great texture for the buildings, an excellent close-up here, and as you can see, some pretty impressive monuments caught once again in low light conditions. Great details, a nice close-up. I would even go as far as to place this phone in the top 10 handsets with good low light captures. And I have to say that when it comes to the low light photo taking, with the Huawei G8 is above all the Huawei Honor models and all the Asus phones, as well as the Galaxy A5 and Galaxy A7 2016. Now if you want to talk about the video, let's go to the other gallery. So first things first, you can only shoot up to Full HD, MP4 format, 30 frames per second and 20 megapixel bitrate, and the videos look like this. So you have a pretty okay clarity, good colors, a pretty solid microphone that catches all the background noise and voices and the general surroundings. I feel that the image is rather shaky, especially for a phone that promises optical image stabilization, and when you start to zoom in, you'll see that there's a bit of blur going on, so you'll start to lose some of the quality of the image. Okay, now let's see another video. We obviously tested the optical image stabilization by descending a flight of stairs. The good news, we didn't lose focus. The bad news, the image is a bit too shaky to call this a proper optical image stabilization. And once again, at least there was no focus loss. Okay, and finally we got this clip here. This one has a pretty good exposure change, it's pretty clear on a cloudy day. And once again, the microphone strikes back a very good microphone and good colors. We also shot video at night, and let's see how that went. This is it. And somehow we forgot the resolution to 720p, and still this is impressive. The quality is good. There's quite a bit of detail loss, but the texture of the buildings is nice. So good colors, good quality and good brightness, but when you start to zoom in, things fall apart. Overall, I'd say that the video capture is okay for a mid-ranger, and it beats the Huawei Honor models, which is no small feat. Now it's time to talk about the browser. So we have here the pre-installed browser. Of course you can opt for Chrome, but I'm going to use this one. So let's load up gsmdown.com. As you can see, not exactly the fastest browser in the world, a so-so speed. And sadly, the benchmark for the browser are rather poor. I mean here Velamo, BrowserMark and SunSpider. Now since we're here, time to check out the QWERTY keyboard, virtual keyboard, comfy because the phone is so wide. Now when it comes to connectivity, the options available here include a dual SIM card slot. We have LTE category 4 up to 150 Mbps downloads. There's GPS and GLONASS, Bluetooth 4.0, Wi-Fi BGN, and we only have one band of Wi-Fi, not two of them sadly, and a micro USB 2.0 port here, and once again dual SIM slots. There's also NFC, and we're using here two nano SIM card slots, of which one of them can be used as a micro SD holder. Now it's time to talk about the calls. So when it comes to the calls, we have a good signal, okay clarity, great microphone, but the volume could be higher, it could be louder. We get speed dial, privacy protection, harassment filter, and a lot of other call settings, including a pocket mode. We also tested the speed of the Wi-Fi, and let's see how that played out. And here we go, screenshots. We got up to 20 Mbps in download, 22 in upload. We've seen better than that, so it's an average result. Now time to talk about the battery. So this phablet opts for a 3000 mAh unit, basically 300 mAh more than the Huawei Mate S, for example. And the results are, let's say, mixed, some good and some not as impressive. So let's see how we did in the area of video playback. Okay, looking it up, should be available here somewhere. Here we go, finally. When it comes to the HD video playback test in a loop, 8 hours and 6 minutes. It's a modest result, but it's okay for a mid-ranger. It's 2 minutes below the Huawei Mate S, it's above the Asus Zenfone 2 and the HTC Desire A120. Also, it's below the HTC One A9. There is also the PC Mark test that simulates continuous usage with a quite good result. 6 hours and 58 minutes, not bad at all. We beat the Galaxy S6 Edge and the Nexus 6P, and we're only 8 minutes away from the Galaxy S6, still below the Lenovo Vive X3. Sadly, the charging takes quite a bit, requires 3 hours and 5 minutes, which is a lot, even below cheaper models like the Ligu Lead 1, for example. Of course, we have quite a few settings for the battery. In the power saving area, we got this optimized mode that searches vampire apps and solves the problem, and we have the ultra smart and normal power saving modes. Normal and smart adjust the CPU and network usage, and ultra only keeps the basic features like phone call and messaging, for example. We have protected apps allowed to run with the screen off, and other options include keeping the Wi-Fi on during sleep mode. So overall a good battery, but the charging is a bit on the long side. When it comes to the OS, UI and applications, we're running on Android 5.1 with Emotion UI 3.1, exactly like the Huawei Honor 5X we tested last month. We have a beige skin applied on top of this interface, and multitasking still involves 4 big thumbnails shown like this, with apparently a bit of lag happening here. Here we are, as I said before, we got 4 thumbnails, 4 apps, and we can close them with a swipe up, and that's the multitasking in a nutshell. The look of the interface involves very minimalistic icons and no app drawers, so all the apps are placed on the home screens. Now the lock screen, if you swipe up, you should be able to see these 4 shortcuts towards important features, and if you pinch the home screen, you'll trigger the area with wallpapers, widgets, transition and more settings. Widgets are most of them stock, so nothing fancy. Transitions, typical. and more settings related to the auto alignment of icons, layout, shake, and home screen loop. In the drop down section you can find the notifications of the timeline and the quick settings. And speaking of settings, here we go. We got home screen style, which can be set to standard or simple. We have display sound, storage, screen lock, do not disturb, protected apps, security, and finally fingerprint ID. So this is the fingerprint ID feature, and we can use fingerprint management here and protect it with a pin just for safekeeping. Okay, and you can unlock the screen using your print, and we have already registered the print. So let's see how this goes. You can unlock straight like this only by pressing it once. Here we go. Very fast and very accurate. Let's try pressing it from a 90-degree angle. It works, and from a 180-degree angle, the supreme test, and even that worked. The same fingerprint can do more things, the same fingerprint scanner, and let's see. We can answer calls, take photos of videos, stop alarm, show the notification panel like this. I'm swiping on it and it should show it. Here we go, that's the spirit, and we also got rid of the notifications. Okay, and you can also access a safe zone and an app lock, so very nice fingerprint scanner. Back to the settings, because we have a few more things to show you. We got motion control with gestures available, including drawing, symbols, and double touch. There's a nav bar option, one hand user interface, and finally the area with the gloves mode, suspend button, smart cover, and smart headset control. Now it's time to talk about the apps. We counted 59 pre-installed apps, which is pretty much bloatware in my book. So we got the Google Suite right here with 15 apps. We got a bunch of pre-installed games, social networking apps. Of course we have tools, quite a few of them, like FM radio, torch, mirror, magnifier, backup, and things like that. So overall 59 of them. Most interesting is probably the phone manager. Kind of useful with a phone accelerator, cleaner, and harassment filter. There is the notepad, which also comes in handy, and the themes with a pretty high degree of customization, as you can see here. Okay, so those are all the apps, and now it's time for the verdict related to the Huawei G8. So on the Pro side, we have an original design at last, especially at the facade. We have a solid build, some very nice looking low light pictures, which were the shocking pleasant surprise here. There's no lag, the performance is okay. We have a nice pair of microphones, a good camera, and nice video capture, plus a reasonable battery, I have to say. Other things we're mentioning, well, the cons: this is a very white phone that has black edges around the actual image when watching video. It also could be a bit brighter, I mean the screen, and the 3D performance could also be higher, as shown by the benchmarks. The speaker is not as loud as we'd like it to be, charging is long, and then there's also the bloatware. So things to remember here is that we are dealing with a solid design phone. So Huawei G8 is also nice when it comes to the low light pictures, and it takes a pretty good PC mark test, so it lasts pretty long when it comes to continuous usage, as proved by PC mark, which means it's kind of a gaming phone and also kind of a concert phone on account of the good low light pics and the good microphone. And when gaming and concerts come together, this means that the G8 is ideal for young users, and considering it's so wide, it's ideal for young male users. It's the kind of phone that gets usually an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10, so it's pretty nice. However, I personally would opt for the LG Nexus 5X instead of it. In the end, the choice is yours. This one is much better looking than the LG Nexus 5X. This is gsn1.com. Bye bye.